Hi, welcome to our first lecture, which is basically on operations and productivity. I want you to get a sense of just the basics of OM from this particular lecture. So we're going to focus on what is operations management, organizing to produce goods and services. Why do we need to study operations management? And what do operations managers do? We'll also talk a bit about the heritage and operations in the service sector as well. There are challenges, of course, as the field continues to evolve, because there's just so much happening in terms of technology, that it sometimes poses challenges to operations management. There's also the issue of productivity and understanding what that means. So I'm going to go through this particular chapter to give you a sense of what operations management is all about, and then we will head into some more complex topics as we move on into the course. All right. So we know that we all consume goods and services. So production involves the creation of goods and services, but operations management as a function is really all of the actions or the activities that create value in the form of goods and services. And to be able to create that value, we have to transform inputs into outputs. So there is this sort of transformation system that happens where we take inputs. So if you're, for example, producing a meal, then all of your raw ingredients will be your inputs. Then the whole process of cooking and cooling and mixing and doing all those sorts of things will be part of the transformation process. Of course, peeling and chopping and all of those things. And then, of course, after the meal is prepared, then the output is the completed meal. That's as simple as it is in terms of a conceptual framework. But there are a lot of decisions that have to be made in terms of your choice of ingredients, the kinds of processes that you will use to cook the meal, and then, of course, how you want to present it. So even though we have these three stages that appear to be relatively simple, there are some decisions to be made. All right. Now, operations is actually part of the core functions of any organization. There are three core functions we often talk about: marketing, production and operations, and finance and accounting. So marketing, of course, will generate the demand, let people know what is it that we're offering. Production operations will create the product, and finance and accounting helps to sort of manage these sort of financial assets of the organization, pay bills, collect revenues, invest, and do all of these sorts of wonderful things. So if we look at this in the context of a commercial bank, we'll see on the operations side, we'll have tellers, we have to schedule them, checks have to be cleared, transactions have to be processed, and so on. On the finance side, you have to make investments, you worry about your securities, your real estate, accounting and auditing activities. And then in terms of marketing, well, depending on the kinds of products, so we could be marketing loans to commercial enterprises or individuals or financial institutions themselves. Okay, so the marketing, and then of course delivering commercials about the various types of products that the bank actually offers. And we see, again, we could look at that in terms, we could look at operations management in terms of an airline, where on the operations side, when the flight lands, there's ground operations, maintenance, there's flight operations, crew scheduling, flying itself, the communications, the dispatching, the gating of the flight, and then of course all of the financial things. You have to purchase tickets, you have to manage accounts payable, accounts receivable, there's purchasing and procurement that happens, and then of course in terms of marketing, informing consumers of schedules, prices, and these sorts of things. Okay. Supply chain is an important part of any operation because we have to get the goods into the transformation process. And what we see is an example of a supply chain for a soft drink manufacturer, which involves a farmer, a syrup producer, bottler, distributor, and the retailer. Sometimes you have an intermediate step where there's a wholesaler who then distributes to multiple retailers across a wide geographical area. And then finally, of course, to the consumer. Why should we study operations management? Well, I've already mentioned to you that we all consume products and services, and operations is what's behind the creation of those products and services. So naturally, we need to know something about the activities that go into making those products and services, and the management of those activities is what operations management is all about. Okay, so we've already said it's one of the three core functions. We want and need to know how goods and services are produced. We want to understand the operations that managers actually control, what operations managers do, and then of course recognizing that operations can be up to about 50 to 60, 75% of the cost of goods sold. Then you want to be able to manage operations effectively. There are some basic functions: planning of operations, which is basically determining when things are supposed to happen, how they're supposed to happen, by whom. Organizing, that is creating the sort of a resource base to allow you to deliver the activities that will create a product or a service. Sometimes we have automated situations, but in a large number of cases we still have staffing to do. We have to find the right staff. We have to allocate them to respective jobs. We need to determine what skills and competencies that they need to have, what kind of training and development needs to take place. Of course, if we have a set of goals, production goals or service goals, then the operations manager has to lead the entire operations function to achieve that. And then in the process of trying to lead to achieve that, then there is a need to also be able to control the various operations so that what is expected actually happens. Now there are 10 areas. If we look at the broad field of operations, we could say, hey, we could manage operations by controlling 10 levers, 10 key levers. Now, I'm sure it's very easy for us to come up with 12 or 15, but our textbook basically talks about these 10 areas. And we talk about the design of goods and services, managing quality, process and capacity design, location, that is where do we actually place our facilities, the layout, how you actually lay out the facility to allow for effective flow of people and materials. Of course, we often think of human resource management and job design as part of an HR field, but HR is actually part of operations because you need people to create goods and services. So while we have sort of hived off human resource management as a separate subdiscipline, it really belongs to the broader area of operations management. But we leave that for the HR folks to take care of. We also have supply chain management, inventory management and materials requirements planning, intermediate and short-term scheduling, and of course the maintenance. So we're not going to cover all of these areas. We will cover a subset of them as we will see later on in the course. Okay? So I've already explained to you what those critical decisions are in terms of the design of goods and services. What should we make? For whom should we make it? What level of quality? So then it actually is connected to what we call your value proposition. How do we design these products, right? And what functionality they should have, what features they should have, and so on. Of course, quality, there are a number of questions that we could ask with respect to that as well. How do we define quality? Who is responsible for quality? Processes, what should the capacity of our process be? All right? What kinds of process choices do we have? And what are the relative efficiencies of various processes if we have to make a choice on which one we are going to use? Okay? Location strategy. Location speaks for itself. If you are an organization that have multiple facilities, you have to determine where best to locate them to get whatever benefits that you want to seek, whether it's tax benefits or efficiency benefits and so on. So you definitely want to make sure you understand that. Layout, the layout of a facility is not trivial. If you have a large manufacturing facility, You want to arrange the various workstations in such a way that you optimize workflow. And in optimizing workflow, you optimize efficiency as well. All right? And then I've already talked about the importance of human resource management and human resources and job design, because the way in which a job is designed will influence the efficiency and productivity that you get out of your operation system. Supply chains are responsible for bringing goods into the facility where you're producing, but also out of that facility to the consumer as well. We often require raw materials, and we have to stock those raw materials to ensure that we have a reasonably stable supply of raw materials as we produce in products and services. And so therefore we must manage the inventory effectively. Inventory is a very costly part of operations, so we have to make sure that we manage it very, very well. Okay? And then scheduling has to do with the order, the sequence with which we do things. So sometimes we talk about scheduling workers, but which is not kind of so much the order, but in a production facility, if we're producing multiple items, how do we schedule the sequence of these jobs so that we get them completed in time to meet customer expectations, right? And then of course maintenance. Without preventive maintenance or even corrective maintenance, it then becomes a little bit of a challenge for us to ensure the reliability of the production equipment that we are using. So that could then cause problems down the road if we do not maintain our equipment as much as possible. All right. There are a number of career areas that are related to our operations management, customer service. You could become a quality specialist. You could be someone who is an inventory manager or specialist. You could be a consultant. You could, look at the integration of technology and information systems in production. So there are a number of areas where we make contributions. Operations and services. So operations also have a role to play in the service sector. We know that services tend to be intangible. They're typically consumed at the same time that they're produced. So for example, if you are going to a barber, the barber is actually providing a service, but you're actually consuming that service at the very same time that is being produced. It's often unique because it depends on who the client is. There could be high levels of customization. So if you think about a legal firm working on a legal matter for either an organization or an individual, two individuals may not have exactly the same legal circumstances. So therefore there would be customization in that case. Because service tends to be customized, there is inconsistency in terms of its definition, but also inconsistency in terms of productivity. So we would have to manage productivity extremely well when we're dealing with services, because of the fact that services have a strong correlation with the end user. It's often knowledge based and is frequently dispersed. It happens in multiple locations. All right. Some of the challenges that we see that are being faced in terms of operations management is that with the advent of technology, ethical issues tend to surface. So when we talk about, for example, the use of automation, the use of automation also comes with the likelihood that the organization might find itself overstaffed. Question is, do you want to have a policy of laying off people using automation as a way of cutting your human resources? And while it might look like you're saving money, but you're also affecting people's lives, where do you draw the line? Where do you do the trade-offs between impacting the lives of individuals or worrying about your own profitability when trying to make things more efficient? So we have to give that some consideration. Okay. Global focus, because we see now the world is a global village, then it is not uncommon for companies to want to be in multiple markets across the globe. And so in managing an organization across multiple nations, multiple languages, multiple cultures, that creates certain types of challenges. We are quite concerned about the planet these days, and so therefore, the environmental sustainability issue is front and center for production facilities. What is the impact of your operations on the environment, and how can you reduce your environmental impact or environmental footprint, right? Another issue is that because there is a desire that has been nurtured for variety of products, a number of companies have innovated by finding a way to modularize production, to make production in terms of modules. So if you have a core frame, and then you develop the product in a modularized fashion, you could simply swap out the modules to create a new product. The basic product structure is still the same, but you are creating multiple versions by just switching out components. So a classic example of that is computers, and Dell was one of the pioneers in that area, where if I have a 1 terabyte hard drive, that's one computer configuration. A 2 terabyte hard drive, that's a different configuration. A 13-inch screen, an 11-inch screen, a 16-inch screen. These are three different configurations. So as we take the different configurations of the hard drives, if there are 3 types of hard drives and 3 types of screens, then that is actually 9 types of computers. So it's called mass customization, the idea that you could customize but still have volume. And so that is an area that there are some challenges there as well. Empowering employees, moving from the idea of supply chain management where you force suppliers to compete, but rather you become a strategic partner along with a supplier to ensure that you get exactly what you're looking for. And the idea that we focus on just-in-time management. Another area that operations play a major role is in essence helping organizations to become more productive. And we have to be careful that while we often want to improve productivity, that in the process of improving productivity, that we do not become inhumane, that we recognize that yes, human beings are not machines and therefore work at different rates. And even while we try to promote longevity within an organization where people have a certain length of tenure, if they came into an organization when they're young, in their 20s, and stayed until their 50s, the level of productivity, the amount of energy that person has, well, we are human beings, we age. And as we age, you don't get the same levels of efficiency and productivity. And what does that mean? Does that mean that you now substitute these individuals with computers, automation, innovation that takes them away from the workplace, and then substitute them with equipment? So depending on the kind of philosophy your company has, you will give consideration to that kind of challenge. But nonetheless, we still want to make organizations as productive as possible, even with a given complement of staff. So what is productivity in terms of a definition? Productivity is the ratio of outputs of goods and services divided by the inputs. So it's outputs to inputs. So you can improve productivity by increasing the output for the same level of input, or by reducing the level of inputs for the same level of output, or increasing output and reducing inputs. Then you are making a quantum improvement in productivity. And it is not uncommon for organizations to want to improve their productivity. All right? This is the basic sort of transformation system that I talked about at the beginning, where we produce goods and services through these 3 phases of collecting our inputs, and then taking our inputs into a transformation process, and then creating the goods and services that we're looking for. There needs to be a feedback loop, because if the goods and services are not meeting the needs and expectations of your customers, you now need to either make a change to your transformation system or your input system, or you may even need to reconsider the design of your product. Maybe it's too difficult to produce. So we need to have that feedback loop. All right? So, improving productivity, we have some examples where a team of 10 analysts continually look for ways to save time. Some of you who frequent Starbucks will appreciate that. So Starbucks stopped requiring signatures on credit card purchases under $25. So that was they probably did some analysis that showed that a fairly large number of transactions are under $25. So if you do not require a signature, you save however many seconds or minutes in terms of getting that signature. I would say seconds, of course. So 8 seconds per transaction. And if you multiply that by thousands of people, that's a lot of time saved. All right, change the size of the ice scoop. You're getting new espresso machines and so forth. And so you got a number of improvements as a result of that. All right, operations improvements have helped Starbucks to increase yearly revenue per outlet by 200,000 to 900,000 in 6 years. And that's per outlet, that is. So, yeah, we see this as a good example. But then how can we then look for productivity opportunities in not-for-profits, particularly organizations that are working within communities, and most of the work is actually being done with human labor. And so therefore we would have to look at the ways in which we design our jobs. We would have to look at the supports that the workers actually use to get the job done. If they could use certain technological supports, that would certainly help to improve our productivity as well. So going back to the basic measure, productivity is the units produced versus the units used. So measure of process improvement. If we improve processes, we're expecting improved productivity. And one of the ways of measuring if we've actually improved is to look at the productivity measure. All right, that certainly helps with respect to that. It represents a relative it represents output relative to input, because it's a ratio, of course. And only through productivity increases can our standard of living improve. Yes, I guess so in that regard, but we have to be careful that as we seek in productivity increases, we do not make the worker dispensable, because when we make the worker dispensable, how are you improving their quality of living? You might be improving quality of living, but for only those who are left, who are not impacted by those decisions and who could afford the often increased price of those improvements. Not always, but so as we tend to use technology to get things done faster, quicker, offer variety and all those things, that often comes at a price. So we have to be careful that we're not disadvantaging workers as we attempt to improve so-called the quality of life, because if they're not working, then their quality of life is negatively impacted. So here's an example of 1,000 units produced. The number of labor hours is 250, so therefore the productivity is 4 units per labor hour. If we could reduce the labor hours needed to 125, then we would have an improvement in productivity of almost 100%, because now we have 8 units. We'll be able to produce 8 units, which is double the productivity level. Okay? We could compute what we call a multi-factor productivity measure by considering multiple inputs. So the output is given, but then the types of inputs can increase: labor, material, energy, capital, or whatever else that we want to add. So we call that a multi-factor productivity measure, also known as total factor productivity. And they have to be of the same units. So if they are different units, then you try to convert them to a common unit, such as dollars. All right? And we do have sometimes in quality, in operations management, that quality can sometimes be measured differently by different people depending on what the definitions are. And so we need to give that some consideration when we're talking about measuring improvements, measuring productivity, because while you might improve the quantity of items produced, the quality can change. Okay? Productivity variables: labor, capital, and management. These are some of the things that help and to improve productivity in services. Often those services are labor intensive, and improving productivity can be from changing your methods of production or the way in which the employees actually work and get things done. The processes can be redesigned. You could use some technology and leverage those technologies in the process. You could also improve the knowledge and understanding of your staff. So the better developed your staff members are, then the greater quality that you get, the greater the quality and the productivity out of them. Okay. So as an example of improving productivity in a quote-unquote service organization. However, but let's think about organizations like Taco Bell, McDonald's, and so on. They are technically manufacturing firms. They manufacture tacos, manufacturing burgers. And so to a large extent, we think it's a service, but it's not so much a service. Really, there's a whole manufacturing plant behind that counter at McDonald's that's producing a burger for you. You see the burgers are actually going through the cooking, the oven on a conveyor belt, right? And when it comes off, the buns are sitting there and then they're assembled. The product is actually assembled. Anyway, some improvements come from revising your menu, that is limiting the number of items, and limiting the number of the variety of items, because the more variety you have, the less likely it is that you are going to be as productive as possible, because variety tends to kind of work in opposition to productivity. Standardization tends to promote productivity. Design meals for easy preparation, shifted some preparation to suppliers so that by the time the items came to them, the number of steps that Taco Bell had to perform was reduced, and so that helped it to be faster in terms of its service delivery. Better layout and automation, training of employees, and new water and energy saving grills. All right. So finally, we have to keep in mind that operations does present some social responsibility and sustainability challenges, also ethics. So when we're designing operations, we need to think about ethical matters around how we're affecting humanity with the changes that we're making. Social responsibility, that is how we're impacting our societies and communities. And then, of course, environmental sustainability as well. All right. So we need to make sure that we develop safe, quality products, we maintain a clean environment, provide a safe workplace, and then that we are also honoring stakeholder commitments. So these are some of the things that we want to keep in mind. So this was an introduction to operations management. We're going to move now into the role that operations play in terms of supporting the mission and the vision of an organization, and that particular area we refer to as the strategic role of operations, operation strategy. That will be in our next video.